Welcome to the deep dive. We tackle complex topics, try to pull out the insights you need to, well, stay ahead.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're plunging into something that sounds straightforward but isn't always the smart grid.
Right. High-tech electricity network. Simple enough?
You'd think so, but defining exactly what makes a grid smart, that's where it gets surprisingly tricky and important.
Absolutely. This isn't just, splitting hairs academically. How we define smart grid affects research, investment, how power companies operate, basically the future of our energy.
Which is why we're digging into this paper one of you sent us. It's called Smartening the Grid Through Increments and Evolutions Toward Energy Transition, Insights from Argumentation Analysis.
Quite a title.
It is.
Yeah.
It's by Alireza Fereidunian, Mohammed Hossein Tamimi, and Ehsan Shahi from the 6th International Conference on Optimizing Electrical Energy Consumption.
And it really gets to the core of the question. What is a smart grid? It looks at all these different definitions, how they've changed.
Yeah. So our mission today is to unpack all that. Why does the definition matter so much, and how did we even get to this point?
Well, the authors start with a great little story. Really tells you something. They talk about submitting papers to the IE transactions on smart grid.
Okay.
So back in 2021, they got a paper accepted. It was about improving grid reliability, using switches, standard stuff, seemingly.
Right. Sounds like it fits.
But then, just 3 years later, 2024, they submit a follow-up. This one's on resilience. Very related concept, obviously.
Yeah, closely linked.
The same journal rejects it. The editor-in-chief said it was actually outside the scope of a smart grid now.
Wow. In just 3 years.
Exactly. So right away, you see the problem. Even the experts, the gatekeepers, don't have a fixed idea. The goalposts are moving.
That really shows the lack of a solid, consistent understanding, doesn't it? Even at the highest levels.
It does. And the authors mention this isn't a new thing for them. At their university, they've been wrestling with this definition for, over a decade. They've had a postgraduate course on it for 12 years.
12 years just debating the definition.
Well, covering the topic, but emphasizing how fundamental and still debated the definition is. It's foundational but fuzzy.
It's interesting, too, the paper brings up language. How in English, we tend to say grid modernization more often than, say, smartening the grid. But apparently, in Persian, they adopted a term huzmansazi pretty early on, which translates directly to smartization or smartening.
That is interesting. Makes you wonder if the language itself shapes how we think about it, how quickly we embrace the smart aspect directly.
Could be a subtle thing, but maybe important for early concepts.
But beyond words and academic debates, this fuzziness has real practical problems. The authors mentioned an anecdote
Oh, yeah.
about a company official basically questioning if smart grid projects were even relevant to a traditional power delivery company.
Seriously. So you're trying to innovate, get funding maybe, and people inside your own company are asking if it's even your business.
Exactly. How do you sell the value, get buy-in for projects, if there's no shared baseline understanding of what you're even talking about? It's a huge hurdle.
Like trying to build a car when half the team thinks you're building a boat.
Pretty much. The paper also mentions maturity models, like the smart grid maturity model. The idea there is maybe you define smart by progress.
How so?
Like a grid only gets called smart once it hits certain milestones. Maybe when pilot projects are up and running, showing results. It's more about the journey, the stage of development.
That's a different way to look at it. More practical, maybe.
And it's cool that this whole investigation in the paper was partly inspired by real discussions happening among experts on the IEPS Power Globe Forum initiated by Professor P.F. Ribeiro.
So it wasn't just theoretical. It came out of actual ongoing debate in the field.
Right. It shows this is the live issue, not something already settled.
Okay, so let's talk about that evolution. How has the understanding changed?
Well, the big picture, according to the literature they review, is this massive shift from the old model, big power plants, electricity flowing one way to us.
The traditional grid.
Right. To something much more distributed. Power, and crucially, information flowing both ways. And that's all enabled by IT, by communications tech woven into the grid.
So it's interactive, manageable in real time almost.
That's the goal. And the paper shows this interesting trend analysis. They looked at how often smart grid popped up in research databases.
Like Google Trends, but for scientific papers?
Sort of, yeah. In IE Explore, the engineering database, there was this sharp spike around 2009.
Why then?
That lines up perfectly with a major U.S. government announcement about investing heavily in grid modernization. Big money talks.
Okay. Follow the money.
But interestingly, in Science Direct, which is a broader scientific database, the increase was slower. It came later.
Any ideas why the difference?
Our guess, E04, reflects the immediate buzz in the core electrical engineering field, especially tied to that funding. Science Direct catches up later as the concept spreads out to other related disciplines, maybe policy, environment, etc.
That makes sense. Different communities picking it up at different speeds. So what about actual definitions from big organizations? The paper mentions a few.
Yeah, it lays out some key ones. The European Technology Platform talks about intelligently integrating all users, generators, consumers, everyone, for efficient, sustainable, economic, secure power.
Okay, focus on integration and outcomes there.
Then the U.S. Department of Energy. Their definition stresses using digital technology to boost reliability, security, efficiency. And they specifically mention handling distributed resources, like solar panels on roofs.
More tech-focused and includes the new energy sources.
And then there's a UK initiative definition, smarter grids. The opportunity. They focus on the grid being observable, controllable, automated, fully integrated, really emphasizing the capabilities enabled by sensors, communications, processing.
So similar themes: intelligence, integration, efficiency, security, but different angles, different priorities highlighted.
Exactly. Europe on sustainability and economics, the U.S. on reliability and distributed energy. The U.K. really on the technical nuts and bolts of control and automation, shows different regional drivers, maybe.
And the paper gives some history too, right? This didn't just appear in 2009.
Oh, definitely not. It mentions early work by EPRI, their IntelliGrid concept. IBM was talking about intelligent utility networks. There was even this idea of an electric geodesic network, kind of like the internet.
So the seeds were planted much earlier.
For sure. And academic places like Carnegie Mellon were key, developing that maturity model we mentioned. Plus, lots of individual utilities were experimenting early on. It grew organically, piece by piece.
Moving away from utilities, just buying separate bits of kit for separate problems.
Right. Towards a more holistic, integrated view, which you really need for today's complex systems.
Okay, so the authors then try to categorize these definitions: technology-focused versus problem-focused.
Yeah, that's a useful split they propose. Tech-focused definitions, like one from the IEC, really zoom in on the hardware and software. Two-way communication, control systems, distributed computing, sensors everywhere, especially at the customer end.
The how.
Exactly. Then the problem-focused ones, like from ERGAG, the European Regulators Group, look at the why. What problems is it solving? Cost-effectively integrating everyone, making the system efficient, sustainable, high-quality, secure, safe. The desired outcomes.
How versus why, both valid perspectives.
Totally. Neither is better, just different ways to slice it. And they also mention Matt Boland's definition, which adds another layer.
What's his focus?
He emphasizes enabling renewables, smoothing out demand curves, creating incentives for efficiency, and empowering consumers to be active players. More about the actions the smart grid facilitates.
Okay, so bringing renewables and active consumers into the definition explicitly.
Right, so if you mash it all together, the big goals seem to be boost efficiency, cut costs, improve reliability and resilience, make power clean, affordable, dependable.
Contribute to energy independence, fight climate change. Quite the list.
It's hugely ambitious, which is probably why we get those cool nicknames the paper mentions, like electricity with the brain or the energy internet, the electronet.
It captures the scale of the transformation.
And the NIST definition tries to be comprehensive, hitting those key points. Bidirectional flows of both energy and information, plus the advanced comms and control.
And we shouldn't forget that U.S. law, the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, ISA, that really pushed the term smart grid into the spotlight, right?
Absolutely. It gave it policy weight and public visibility. Big moment.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Now, the paper connects the smart grid to the bigger picture, the energy transition, using this three-pillar idea.
Yeah, this is a really neat framework. They argued the smart grid basically arises from three big shifts happening together. First, the IT revolution enabling everything. Second, the deregulation and then re-regulation of energy markets. And third, the rise of viable distributed energy resources, or DRs.
IT, markets, and DRs, the three pillars.
Exactly. And then they argue these three pillars have sort of evolved into the key themes of the energy transition we're seeing now. Digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization.
Ah, I see the link. IT enables digitalization.
Right. Market changes push towards decentralization.
And DRs are key for decarbonization. Makes sense. Can you elaborate on how those connect?
Sure. So the initial IT integration, that was the foundation. Now it's Full-blown digitalization, advanced ICT, real-time data flowing everywhere, sophisticated control, the market shifts.
Yeah.
Deregulation created space for new players, new models, pushed things like demand-side management.
Which leads to more decentralization, with consumers playing a bigger role.
Precisely. And the DERs, solar, wind, batteries, etc., they were initially something the grid needed to manage, which spurred smart grid tech. Now they're central to the decarbonization effort itself, reducing fossil fuels.
So the IT or ICT advancements, cheaper, better communication, they're the bedrock, allowing all that real-time monitoring of voltage, current, consumption.
Absolutely critical. That data flow enables dynamic load management, lets the grid operators optimize things on the fly, and empowers consumers to react to things like real-time prices.
And the market changes amplified things like demand-side management or DSM.
Hugely.
Yeah.
DSM includes energy efficiency efforts, but also demand response, DR programs. That's where consumers adjust their usage based on signals.
Like getting paid to use less power during peak hours.
Exactly. Price-based signals or incentive payments. The paper mentions both types. And getting that flexibility from the demand side helps integrate renewables and ultimately supports decarbonization.
And then the renewables and DRs themselves, key for cutting emissions, obviously. But they bring challenges, right? Like intermittency.
That's the big one.
Correct.
Solar doesn't work at night. Wind isn't always blowing. Managing that variability is a core smart grid function. But DRs also offer benefits besides being clean. Less energy lost in long-distance transmission lines because generation is closer to where it's used, and potentially enhanced reliability if you have local power sources during a wider grid outage. It's a trade-off, a balancing act.
So it's this constant interplay. Digitalization providing the tools, decentralization changing the players and market dynamics, and decarbonization setting the ultimate goal, all enabled by smart grid tech.
You've got it. They're not separate streams. They're all tangled together, driving this massive transformation.
Okay, the final big piece of the paper is this analysis of the Power Globe Forum discussion, using something called argumentation theory. Sounds a bit intense.
Yeah, it sounds more academic than it is in practice here. Basically, they used it as a tool to systematically analyze the online debate about defining the smart grid.
How does that work?
They did two things. First, a structural analysis, mapping out who was responding to whom, which comments supported others, which disagreed, like creating a visual map of the argument's flow. Figure 4 in the paper shows this.
Okay, mapping the debate structure.
Second, a semantic analysis, looking at the content of the arguments. What criteria were people proposing to define smartness? What ideas kept coming up?
So, tracking the flow and analyzing the actual points being made. What kind of criteria for smartness came out of that forum discussion?
Well, it evolved. Initially, someone might suggest something simple, like how many homes are powered by renewables?
Seems measurable.
But then others would jump in, pointing out issues like, well, renewables fluctuate. And what about energy storage? So it gets complicated fast.
Right, not so simple.
Then they mentioned the U.S. DOE's 2009 report again, with its 20 criteria, automation, reliability, capacity factor, things like that.
A more comprehensive list?
Yeah, and forum participants added more, needing digital and flexible networks, focusing on energy efficiency, grid resilience becoming a big one.
So the list kept growing.
It did. They eventually grouped these criteria into categories, things you can measure, future trends, deployment challenges, and recommendations.
And the paper also stressed that the definition depends on your viewpoint.
Exactly. Your average customer. They probably care most about affordable, reliable power that stays on. That's smart to them.
Makes sense.
Someone looking at the whole system, maybe policymakers, they might focus on overall cost effectiveness, security, environmental benefits, social welfare.
A broader view.
And the industry folks, the engineers. They might see smart as the convergence of tech communications, computing, power electronics enabling better control, customer interaction, optimized resource use, security.
Different priorities based on who's asking.
But interestingly, one thing that cut across many perspectives was the importance of control systems, especially distributed control and monitoring for better reliability and efficiency. Everyone seemed to agree on that.
And cheaper communication tech made this more feasible, right? Getting data down to individual homes.
Absolutely key. That dropping cost of IT&T is what enables so much of this. It allows for
that two-way flow seems like the big differentiator from the old grid.
It really is. That and the increasing role of distributed generation, DERs, that's another critical piece because it can actually reverse the traditional power flow direction sometimes.
So power flowing from homes back to the grid.
Exactly. So the forum discussion seemed to move towards this broader view. A truly smart grid needs to incorporate cost-effectiveness, market dynamics, distributed generation, and manage changing consumption patterns via active loads and reducing peak demand. It's got to do it all.
Quite a balancing act. And the conclusion was that smartness isn't really an on-off switch.
Right. It's more like a spectrum, a hierarchy, a continuous evolution. As two-way data communication gets better and more widespread, it enables more sophisticated distributed control, making the grid progressively smarter.
So it's a journey, not a destination. Incremental improvements.
Precisely. It's evolving, not a sudden flip.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the main takeaway really is that smart grid doesn't have one single static definition. It's changed, it's still being debated, reflecting new tech, new challenges, different priorities.
Yeah, and understanding why it's debated. Why clarity matters for research, for investment, for actually building this future grid that was the point of this deep dive.
Understanding the scope, its role in the huge energy transition, and appreciating that even the experts are still figuring parts of it out.
Exactly. It's a work in progress, a really important one.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener. Given all these evolving definitions and the incredibly fast pace of change, what do you think defines the ultra-smart grid of the future? As we move towards, hopefully, a fully decarbonized system, what new benchmarks will we use? What will smart mean then?
Something to chew on. How will it impact you, your energy use, the whole landscape?
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.